Hello and welcome to another episode of Laptop Retrospective, and as you can tell, I have another Dell for us to take a look at. Now, this is actually not a portable monitor, this is a Dell 2-in-1, and this is the 3390. So it is essentially, one of those 2-in-1 360-degree flips that has two reinforced hinges to allow the laptop to be used in a standard laptop configuration with a touchscreen. You can tell from the gloss there as I wave to myself. And then of course it can be flipped over and used as a tablet form factor, which has both some strengths and limitations. This machine was built in 2018 and is a 13.3-inch 1920 by 1080 IPS touch panel display. That is the configuration that it comes in. I need to kind of press pause here because this is a bit of a complaint / rant, if you will, with regards to Dell's documentation, specifically its manuals. When I was doing my notes for this laptop, as I do every single computer, I ran into an interesting conundrum. I started to write the notes based on the service manual. And on page, I believe, 48 of the service manual, it listed some CPUs. And I'm thinking, okay, these are the CPUs that are included in the laptop. So I wrote them down and I said, these are the ones I'm going to talk about on the video. And then I took a quick look at the palm rest and I was thinking, okay, that palm rest sticker says 8th generation Core i5. That was not on page 48. That's a little interesting. And I went back online and I went through a few review articles of this machine when it came out, and they did mention 8th generation Intel chips. But those weren't the CPUs that were mentioned on page 48. So I was getting a little bit confused. I was thinking, okay, what's wrong? Is the sticker wrong? Is there a newer motherboard in there than the chassis would lead me to believe? I've had that happen before with Dell, so if you want to learn more about that, click that video up there. But it turns out that I was looking in the wrong section of the service manual. In this instance, and I haven't really dived any deeper to see if other Dells are like this, if I went to page 64, there was another list of CPUs, and they weren't necessarily the same ones on page 48. So I had two pages in the service manual, neither of which lined up perfectly with one another, and listed all of the CPUs, I think, between these two pages that this machine came with. So that was a little bit confusing. I'm used to reading, single-paged charts that tell me exactly what CPUs shipped in a model, and that's kind of it. I don't feel like I need to, fact-check that. But in this case, I did. So your CPUs are a huge list. Everything from Pentiums to 6th generation i3s, 7th generation, 8th generation, it's all there. So when you're buying one of these things, make real sure that you know what you're getting. Don't necessarily trust the sticker. Don't trust on the bottom. If it were me, I would be asking someone to be like, okay, show me a picture of the About Your PC or the BIOS screen or something so I know exactly what CPU I'm getting with this model, because you could be getting all sorts of different things because of how long this chassis has lived for. And of course, you're going to have different GPUs, everything from HD Graphics 510 all the way up to UHD 620, and everything in between. Now, in terms of RAM, 4 to 16 gigabytes of DDR4 2133 megahertz is supported. And according to what I was able to discern without opening the machine, we were looking at, for drives, hard disk, M.2 SATA, and potentially M.2 PCIe NVMe. So again, unless you have pictures of the inside of this thing, you might be surprised on what you get. All that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at our interface and the ports, and then we will open the bottom panel and see what we actually got on the inside. So we do have a single click pad here, which is okay. There is no dedicated buttons, but there is areas on the trackpad marked for where the button detection will occur. The keyboard is sufficient. It's not exactly super resistive or anything I would write home about. You will note as the keys protrude up through the top case that if you do want to replace this keyboard, you have to pull pretty much the entire machine apart to do that, which is a bit of a letdown, but That's kind of standard on most Dell Latitudes that I've seen recently. We, of course, have a beautiful hinge here, which is pretty stiff and stays where you put it. We have a series of cameras up at the top, which I believe include Windows Hello as well on this model. Let's talk about some ports and buttons. So on the right-hand side, we have the power button and a volume rocker. We do have a full-size SD card slot, which is nice to see, USB 3.0, and then of course a cable lock slot. On the back, we have our fan exhaust, which is an interesting place to put it, because if you think about how this machine is likely to be held, you're probably going to hold it like that and block it. So, you know, just think it through. Over here we have our barrel plug for charging, USB Type-C, HDMI, USB 3.0 again, and then a headphone microphone combo jack. And along the front of the machine, we pretty much have absolutely nothing. So without further ado, let's flip this machine over, grab our trusty screwdriver kit, and remove this bottom panel. Now, this particular example happens to be missing one of its rubber feet, but there are no screws underneath of it, so you don't need to worry about removing it. It just is absent on this one. So we'll just start in a particular corner and spin the screws out. They should be captive on this model if it's like every other Latitude that I've taken apart. Oh, and they're not. Or at least that one isn't. Okay, no, I spoke too soon. They are not captive. Oh, that's too bad. They were captive on the last Dell I took apart, and apparently there is something magnetic over there. I wonder if that's part of the speaker chamber or something else, maybe used to help the laptop understand what configuration it's in. Magnetic sensors have in the past been used for things like that, detecting when the lid is closed, and that's probably what's going on there if it's not part of the speakers. Okay, that is all of the screws removed, and I've always had pretty good luck opening up Latitudes at the back closest to the hinge. I feel that's where the gap most easily shows itself, and also where the clips tend to be the strongest. So once we get that started, ooh, that came pretty easy. And just flex it a little bit there. And no ribbon cables, that's great. So we'll just pull that off to the side. Okay, so we have a 42 watt-hour battery in there, and we do have 2 speakers, but it would appear that they have nothing to do with that. So we've got some magnets here and here, which again are probably designed to help keep the machine closed. It doesn't look like they actually serve any purpose beyond that. Removal of the battery would be pretty easy. We have one screw here, one screw here, one here, and one here. Our battery connector is actually hidden right there, and then goes to the motherboard here. We do have a few cables that are taped together, and then the board is actually split into a main board and what we might call a daughter board. And it's interesting how they've decided to do this, actually, because there's only one port, a USB port, and then we've got our SD card reader, and then we have a whole bunch of other stuff attached. Like the CMOS battery is attached. We have the button controls are attached to this board, and our Wi-Fi card is attached to this board. So that is really interesting how that has been designed. I'm guessing it's well, we ran out of room, we have to put the fan here, so just build a bridge around it. So in terms of like millimeters, I wouldn't call it an exceptionally efficient design. Like the cutouts on the motherboard don't exactly like hug the fan as tightly as I've seen on some manufacturers' boards. So that's kind of an interesting little aside. We do have a full-size 2.5-inch bay, which does have a Western Digital Blue SSD, but this is the cable here that you would probably remove, and then you would see a caddy for an M.2 in its place. So if you're running an M.2, it would be a little lighter, but there would also be a significant amount of space remaining. And I wonder if you could like gang two together. I'm not entirely sure. If we continue our exploration, specifically with the cooling solution, I find this interesting. So there is vents that run from where my finger is here to here. And this is a piece of hard plastic. And if we take a look at the back of the case, there is no real fan coverage except for here and here. And I don't know if this is just my example, but there is mesh over this hole. There isn't mesh over this hole. And that mesh would line up with the CPU intake, or the exhaust, right there. And looking at how that lines up, there is a gap where this fan coil doesn't actually line up with any of the holes. So it's not a perfect fit, and there's a small amount of it that I think that's going to get bounced around in this section of the board. And then, of course, the other thing is that your air intake is right along this side here, and your heat pipe here is in the way of that. Now, if you take a look at this section right here, which does have a mesh, that is not blocked by the heat pipe when we look at where it ends up on the system board. So that is really interesting on how that cooling system has been set up. And I don't mean to be like, you know, they did it wrong, because the machine works, but I can't help but feel that even though this looks very innocent, that this was a machine probably built on a significant amount of compromise when it was being engineered. Maybe they wanted to reuse chassis parts from something else to reduce the cost of manufacturing, but between the split board, how the cooling system is set up, where the air intake and air exhaust is happening, and you do run the risk of covering that up with your hand a good chunk of the time, especially if it's in tablet mode. It's interesting. So I'd be really curious to know what you guys think about that in the comment section down below. Any ideas or wonders would be really cool to hear about. Okay, enough of the cooling. So over here we have two DIMM slots. One is unoccupied, and the other has a stick of 8 gigabytes in it, which means that this machine is 50% of the way of being maxed out. You could put one more stick of 8 for a total of 16, and then that would be that. We see a whole bunch of ribbon cables here, which are for the trackpad and other I/O on the other side, and of course that can't be dealt with unless you remove the entire board and pretty much everything else in the way. And then over here we've got some display cables, as well as a few other connectors for speakers and what have you. So overall, it is a fairly serviceable machine in terms of accessing drive, RAM, Wi-Fi card, CMOS battery, main battery. It's all facing the right direction. The only thing that, of course, isn't is your keyboard. That's a full disassembly of the entire machine. The cooling system and this board layout leads me to believe, especially on this side, that they were just trying to make something work and they had to do it. In terms of serviceability, though, it's pretty good. In terms of its interior design, I have questions, and I am not an expert, but I still have questions when I look at something that's built like this. At any rate, I'm going to throw the cover back on, turn it on, see what we get for boot times, and just check out some final things on its usability. All right, with this machine back together, let's go ahead and open this thing up and turn it on with this side-mounted button. One thing that's interesting to note about this particular unit is that the battery is worn just over half. So out of that 42 watt hours, it's down to about 27. So eventually the new owner of this will probably want to get that replaced if they need good battery life. As you can see, the screen has some pretty decent viewing angles despite it being exceptionally high gloss, which again, so long as you're okay with that, this won't pose to be any issue. And we are looking at the Core i5-8350U variant, and as we saw on the inside, it is sporting 8 gigabytes of RAM. And overall, this is a pretty decent machine. I would certainly not call it my favorite 2-in-1 form factor or design for that matter. There are just a couple too many compromises in my personal opinion. But that being said, if one of these can be found at the right price, then you might be persuaded to purchase. And that brings me to a pretty good point, is that these are usually relatively inexpensive. Some of the Core i7, the i5 7th generation versions go for less than 200 Canadian dollars, and some of the 8th generation go for as little as 250 Canadian dollars. So even though there is a few compromises being made, if you're looking for a Windows 11 capable laptop that is a bit more on the budget side of things, if you can find one, there is some value to be had just for some of the base performance specs. At any rate, ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed our look at this interesting 2-in-1 tablet-style computer, which, you know, has a few things to be desired, especially with where your hand position might end up in comparison to that fan if it's doing heavy productivity tasks, but overall, it isn't too shabby. And if you did enjoy this video, I would strongly encourage you to do the big four. Please like the video, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so the next time I feature a Dell, I guess that's a rhyme, you'll be the first to know about it. Thank you so much. I hope you found it useful, and I'll see you next time.